Let's make a first contribution with Cindy. Cindy's first change will be very simple. She wants to add a color to the cube object. So she quickly creates a new material, adds it to the cube, and as we would expect, this results in two new changes. One to the scene file and the added material. So let's check in. And now let's see how that change will look on Andy's side. But before we do that, let's take a brief look at Plastic, where we can see a new change set. And when we hover over it, we can see that this change set is coming from the user Cindy. Now, you might have noticed that this time the colors of the change sets look a little bit different because we have those slight orange pieces on those circles. And those pieces come from a setting that I have enabled here, which is basically allowing you to give different colors to different users. And since all of those first four change sets were coming from Andy, you can see it's using his orange color, and by that we can immediately understand that those are Andy's change sets. We can disable that, then all change sets will have the same color. But since we just added Cindy, she is not represented in this list yet. So let's just add her. Here we can select Cindy. Now we can choose a color for her. Let's go with blue to have a nice contrast. And now we can see the latest change set has this different color than the ones before, and we can clearly understand by that this one is coming from Cindy. Let's now again switch to the other computer which Andy is working on. So here we are on Andy's machine. And before we actually consider Cindy's changes, let's pretend that Andy in the meantime also made some changes on his own. His spectacular change obviously is to color a different object. For that, he already added a blue material here, which he only needs to add to version control and apply the material to the sphere. Now, watch what happens when I save the scene. You might have noticed down here the warning changed into an error, and it tells us that we have a conflict. Now, if Andy didn't know about Cindy's contribution, he might be a bit confused. Why should his change introduce a conflict? But since he invited Sandy, he might suspect that the reason for the conflict might come from her contribution. So let's take a look what happened. You can see we automatically switched to the incoming changes tab where we can see Cindy's contributions. We can see that Cindy added a red material, and from her comment we can see that she added a red color to the cube object and thereby manipulated the scene file in which the conflict then occurs. Now Andy thinks about it and comes to the conclusion that since Cindy manipulated the cube object and he manipulated the sphere, this conflict actually should be resolvable pretty easy. So we can choose resolve conflicts down here and then reload the scene. And what you can see now is we have both changes from Cindy and Andy, and Unity could resolve the conflict automatically. If we now take a look in Plastic, we get the following picture. If you look closely, you can see that this change set has Cindy's color, so it has a blue color on the change set, which means that Cindy's change set is now incorporated on Andy's side. But Andy's changes, making the sphere blue, they are still listed as pending changes, obviously, because Andy did not check them in yet. So back in Unity, here we have our changes. Let's quickly check them in. And when we refresh in Plastic, we can now see we have one change set from Cindy, the blue one, and then finally the last change set is coming from Andy. And now Cindy obviously should be able to also pull Andy's changes and see them in her version of the project. Back on Cindy's machine, we can see the project where Cindy left it. That is, she added the red color to the cube. Now, immediately after Andy checked in his change set, on Cindy's side, this notification down here appeared one new change set available. And as we saw before with Andy, this is the section where you will get notifications when some of your collaborators change something on the project. So again, we can go on View, which will bring us to the Incoming Changes tab. And here we can see what Andy did. Again, we can see a new material was added and some change was introduced to the scene. Because Cindy already checked in, there is no conflict. Her current state is clean. There are no pending changes. So if we look closely, we can even see precisely what is going to happen when we update the workspace. Two files will be added. Those are the material files and the meta files, and one file will be changed, and that is the scene file. So we go update workspace, and when we reload the scene, Cindy now also has the material in her project and the same state of the scene file as Andy does. And when she looks at her change sets, the last change set is coming from Andy. Okay, so far everything went very smooth in the collaboration between Andy and Cindy. But as you might guess, this is not always the case. For that, let's explore the following scenario. Now, Cindy likes a red color and she keeps going with adding it to different objects. The final object that is left is this cylinder here, so she takes a red color and applies it. This is just a very simple change to the scene file, so we just check in. And switch to Andy's machine. So here we are back on Andy's machine, and let's again simulate the scenario where Andy made some changes in the meantime without realizing that there was some change from Cindy, or maybe Cindy's change came after Andy's change. Obviously, Andy's change is to give the cylinder a different color, this time blue. When I now save the scene, I get a conflict, which makes sense because both devs touch the scene file. And in this case, it even gets worse because both devs touch the same object. Now, as we already mentioned in the merge conflict section of the course, in my opinion, in Windows, we have a small bug here. Because if I would choose resolve conflicts now, Unity would actually try to resolve this conflict manually and just arbitrarily choose one of the versions, which is probably not what I want. On a Mac, it would open a new window where I have to manually resolve the conflict in the scene file, and in my opinion, that is the correct behavior. So before this bug is resolved, what you can do on Windows is, before you actually resolve the conflict, you can right-click on the file that is of interest for you, and now you can decide what version you want to keep. In my case, because Andy made the blue changes, he wants to keep his changes, and his changes are the changes in the current workspace. So he would have to choose this option. Let's quickly check in and see the final result in Plastic. Here we can see Cindy's change that is making the cylinder red, and then Andy's change, which is overwriting the cylinder color. If we inspect the div as a text in the text version, we can see the mesh renderer on the cylinder object basically just changed the material. And again, on a Mac, while resolving the conflict, you would have an extra window which would allow you to choose which material you actually want to keep. Okay, that was a first glance at collaboration. Obviously, as you saw with the conflict resolution, all of the topics we covered in the course before still apply here as well. But there are also a few new topics that will arise when you want to collaborate. So let's take a look at some of them in the next videos.